pressure. These are the trucks that are actually treating or supplying the frac solution, mixing it, and then injecting it into the formation. I'd like to give you one example of a hydraulic fracturing job here in Ohio in the Utica. Keep in mind that very few of these wells have been completed. I think the number's at 11. Can't remember what I had on the slide before. It's right around 11. There's actual information on 3 of these wells. The reason why the information isn't out there yet is that by law, oil and gas companies are not required to report their production or turn over their well logs until 1 year after they've commenced drilling of the well. And that's so that they can, keep things to themselves so that their competitors out there don't get the information and jump right on it. So it's for competitive reasons that this is done. This well was done in Carroll County. It's the Niger 3H well. It's one of the wells for which there was information released by Chesapeake back in September. They gave peak production rates on 4 wells, 3 in Ohio, 1 in Pennsylvania. This particular well had a horizontal leg of 4,152 feet, so a little less than a mile. It was fractured in 14 stages. You don't do this hydraulic fracturing in just one big long 4,000-foot leg. You do it in stages. This one had 14. Each stage had about 60 perforations in it. Stage was about 250 feet long. This particular job used almost 6 million gallons of water. And that's not out of the ordinary for what we get reported on the Marcellus. The Marcellus and the Utica are 2 completely different formations, and so they're going to use different amounts of the hydraulic fracturing components. The thing about the Utica is this is brand new stuff, and so the Chesapeake's and Range Resources and Devon's and the other companies that are actively pursuing it, they are still experimenting with the mix of water, sand, and chemicals that they need for hydraulic fracturing. And once they get that figured out, they'll do it as efficiently as they can because it's quite expensive. This particular well, this is one of the things that I find kind of staggering, used over 3,000 tons of sand. Now a big semi-truck that would haul sand, I think, can hold about 22 tons. So here's 3,000 tons of sand. Gives you an idea of the amount of truck traffic that comes and goes from these well sites. The peak production on this was a little over 1,600 barrels of oil equivalent, which is an unheard of number for Ohio from the traditional production we've had in the past. This well had 4 strings of casing, one at 80 feet. The protective casing for groundwater went to 466. There's an intermediate string down to about 1,700 feet. And then the final production string went from and these go from the surface down to these depths. And the production casing went from the surface all the way out to the end at 12,503 feet. And you can, when you look at these numbers, you can begin to understand why B&M Star is expanding their operations here in Youngstown. It's a lot of pipe being used. Frac ingredients, water is the dominant ingredient, about 99%. Proppant, that's the sand, we talked about that. There's acid, there's cross linkers to make it viscous under different pressures and temperatures. This water, it has to be like a gel consistency to carry the sand. If it's very fluid like water, the sand's not going to move with it. And so they put a cross linker in it to maintain its viscosity. It's got gelling agents to make it like a gel. It's got iron control, clay stabilizers. The breaker, it actually causes the gel to break down so the fluids will flow back out. Antibacteria, and friction reducers. These are just the common additives that are put in. If you look at Marcellus, which there's an awful lot of information on because there's, about 3,000 wells over there. This is the basic breakdown. The chart doesn't show up too good here, but most of the pie here is water. The part that isn't water is sand. In this particular case for Marcellus is about 0.75% of the chemical agents that we just talked about. Some of the truths about hydraulic fracturing, it does use large quantities of water. The one well that Chesapeake did down in Carroll County, it actually used 27 million gallons of water. That was the very first well that they hydraulically fractured. And if you look at each well as you move on, they cut that down. The next well used 22, the next one after that, 6 million. So they're getting the balance figured out. We talked about the additives. We talked about the sand. Negligent handling of hydraulic fracturing fluid can cause some spills, and that's a major concern. If you think about it, with the oil industry, The problem that's plagued the oil industry from the very early days right up to the last great example would be the BP disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, are spills. And that's still, in my opinion, probably the biggest problem that we have going forward. You've got to be very diligent to make sure that there is no negligence here.